Thessalonians. And we should say 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are almost certainly the two earliest letters in the New Testament. We're not saying that St. Paul didn't write other letters at some point, but these are the earliest ones that are included in the canon of the New Testament. They were written in about 51 or 52 AD, and really only about a month apart. So we're not talking about a great deal of distance in space. And we should take here a very, very brief aside, because I don't think I've done this before, and look at the early work of St. Paul. Just a quick timeline. So Jesus dies in or around 33 AD. The earliest possible time is roughly 30 AD. The latest is roughly 36, but more or less 33 AD. Paul's persecution of the Jews and his subsequent conversion to Christianity follows right on top of that, probably 34 to 35 AD, give or take, and that's the timeline I'm going to use because it's the one I think is most consistent. So Paul does his persecution. He is converted in 34 or 35. He goes to Arabia for personal meditation and to kind of rethink his life and whatnot. From there, he goes into private study in Tarsus until 46 AD. So this is almost 10 years now after Paul's conversion. He has been privately thinking, praying, studying, figuring his situation out, whatnot. And it's in 46 AD that he begins the active work of evangelization after visiting Peter and receiving from Peter his bona fides. Basically, he is ready to go in 46 AD. Paul's first missionary journey, this is the first time he starts establishing churches in and around Asia Minor and in what we would think of as Greece, is 47 to 48 AD. And he's going to cut that short because in 49 AD, they're going to have the Council of Jerusalem, which we heard about in the first readings this past week. And that's where they're deciding whether or not the Gentiles need to be circumcised and, what parts of the Jewish law must be kept. And then at that point, Paul is going to begin traveling again. And so he is converted in roughly 34, 35 AD. He is in private study until 46 AD. And then he's going to begin his work of evangelization in 47. He's going to take a break in 49. And we pick him up here in 51 with his first letter. So this is in the middle of his second kind of missionary journey. So just to give you a sense of times and dates. And so he's writing to the people of Thessalonica twice in 2 months. Now, Thessalonica is in modern-day Greece. It's north of Athens. It was a major seaport and a major trading hub. Now, everybody likes the first chapter of Thessalonians, first and second, because Paul is all about the compliments. You guys are great. You're a hoot to be around. You got great hair. Your town is lovely. The dogs and cats get along. It's very much we're excited, and Paul likes you better than he likes anybody else. Now, this is the first of his letters. We don't know if he's played the old trick that moms and dads play of all my kids are my favorite, but you're my extra favorite or whatever. But he is super in love with the Thessalonians. And so the first several chapters of both letters are all about compliments, or first several verses are about compliments and encouragement. But like what we see explained in the letter to the Colossians, there are troublemakers afoot, and it's the same troublemakers. We have Jews who consider Christianity to be a heresy that needs to be stomped out. Basically, what Paul was doing before his conversion. So we have those folks. Then we have the Gnostics. These are the people who believe there is some secret special knowledge, and if you just know that special knowledge, then you can basically make the universe work your way. You could think of these in a modern sense as kind of like your goofy modern-day Wiccan people who believe that if I take this egg and I draw this shape on it and bury it under here or whatever, that's going to have some effect on the weather. Kind of that degree of goofiness, but they honestly believed it. And these people were very, very deep into what in Greece were called the mystery religions, which was a whole set of religions where you would kind of get initiated into these mysteries, and then they would tell you the secret spells to say and tricks to make this level of the supernatural bureaucracy do what you want them to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we had the Gnostics, we had the Jews, and we had just general pagans who were all pushing their own different religions, whether you're talking about the religions of Assyria, or whether you're talking about the religions of North Germany, or the religions of the other side of Spain, or whatever. And so there's a whole lot of difficulty about being a good Christian in Thessalonica, and Paul starts with encouragement. Now, he also wants to be clear, and really the overarching theme of both of the letters is this: we as Christians are living for eternity, but we're living in the here and now. And so we need to keep in our minds that we're trying to get to heaven, but we have to be in this life now. And we have a certain obligation to ourselves and to those around us to live in this moment. And basically, Paul has a lot to say about the end of days, which he calls the parousia, the second coming of Jesus. No one knows the hour, and so we need to keep ourselves focused on the living for and living in. And with the technical theological term we use for all of this stuff is eschatology, because the eschaton is the end of the world. This is just a Greek word for it. And so we use the word eschatology to describe all of these questions. What are the last things? How do you get to heaven? What is heaven? What's hell? What's purgatory? When will the world end? Why did Jesus not end the world when he kind of implied he would? All of that stuff is eschatology, and Paul is really laying out his eschatology in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. He's going to finish 1 Thessalonians with encouragement, start 2 Thessalonians in the same way, but he's going to dive right back into these questions of eschatology. Now, it's worth noting, and it certainly comes across in this letter, that Paul expects the end of the world to come Tuesday. You know, he is expecting it's around the corner. And so he is only, his whole premise is, for whatever reason, Jesus has delayed his second coming in order that we can get as many people into heaven as possible. Because remember, if you're not a Christian, you're going to hell. Right? In Paul's point of view, there is no back door. And even from our Christian point of view, we don't want to think about the possibility of someone who is not genuinely a Christian. That we don't want to think about, oh, well, they might be able to slip in, or maybe there's a possibility all of them are going to heaven. We don't believe that. And so St. Paul is trying to kind of understand why it is that it's not just been a month, but it's now been 12, 13 years that has not seen the end of days. And so how do we understand that? And so both of the letters to the Thessalonians are really Paul kind of riffing on these themes of eschatology, surrounded with just compliment sandwiches. I mean, very, very, very delicious bread around this very, very complicated theological idea. And of course, as I said, this is something that Paul was thinking about at the very beginning of his writing. He's clearly been preaching about this because these are complicated ideas that the people are ostensibly able to absorb. I'll just say, from the theological point of view, the field of eschatology has a lot to say about this, as you could imagine. The short version is that the Lord has chosen to do the things the way he has chosen to do them because God is God and we are not. Full stop. There are a bazillion other things we can say, but the wisdom of God confounds the wisest of the wise, and that's that. We, for our part, are called to live our faith as in the moments in which we live, to share our faith both privately and publicly, but ultimately to live for eternity in the here and now. The only thing I would recommend in terms of kind of having in the back of your mind as you're reading 1st and 2nd Thessalonians is, in our day, the major eschatological question is actually tied back to Fatima. The appearance of Our Lady of Fatima and the miracle of the sun in October of 1917 is arguably the single most important moment of history since the death and resurrection of Jesus. It's a big, big statement to make, but when it comes to everything we know about heaven, hell, etc., we know what Jesus said. He died and rose, and the next time we got anything remotely that important, other than commentaries on the teaching of Jesus, is Our Lady of Fatima, October 1917. And so when it comes to eschatology, we have Our Lady telling us there's going to be an incredibly dark time in the church, but her Immaculate Heart will triumph, and after that, the world will end. That's a lot of information, incredibly, kind of shocking, bold information. And so in the back of our minds, we want to keep Our Lady of Fatima as, for whatever reason, the Lord has chosen to do things this way. He's chosen to wait 2,000 years. In 1917, for some reason, he sent his mother to explain these details, and we're seeing those things play out in our own, kind of contemporary history. No one knows the day or the hour. We are living for eternity, but we're living in the here and now. And Paul's ultimately going to settle on the fact that the reason the Lord has allowed the world to kind of linger is because there is many souls. He wants to get as many souls into heaven as can reasonably be got into heaven. At the back of our minds, of course, should be Our Lady at Fatima saying, in this modern day and age, more people go to hell than go to heaven. And so there's a lot of kind of heavy things that we want to kind of keep in our minds as we read and understand these massive questions of eschatology in the works of the Thessalonians. And so both of these are asking gigantic questions, but they still remain fun reads because St. Paul just loves him some Thessalonica. They are sweet, they've got great hair, they've got wonderful complexion, their teeth are straight. I mean, he's just got nothing but nice things to say about these folks in Thessalonica. And so two relatively complicated, very early, but still kind of pleasing letters. Both are short, five chapters and 4 chapters. So you're not talking about difficult reading, you're not talking about long reading, but perhaps more than any of the letters I've talked about so far, these really do require some sense of setup to understand what's going on. And of course, eschatology is hard. If you are confused by some of it, don't fret. So are we. I took, I think, 2 separate 3-hour courses on it in seminary, and I think there was another 2 3-hour courses as electives they were just it's a hard subject. It's very difficult, and there's a lot of things that ultimately are mysteries, not the kind of mysteries that are question marks that we just need to give an answer to, but the kind of mysteries that don't fit in our brain mysteries. When God describes heaven, it's not as if there are 53 things and we just need to get the list filled out. It's that the Lord is describing heaven as both a place and not a place, and a union, but also there's time and there's also not time, and then sometime is sometimes, but sometime is not some. It doesn't fit in our brains. It's not a question of I need to get my idea straight. It's a question of ideas can't contain what heaven is. And so a lot of these big questions Paul's trying to get at, it's not that he doesn't have all the right answers, it's that the answers don't fit in the human brain right. And so Paul is simply doing his best to explain to these people he really loves these very difficult questions. And so Thessalonians 1st and 2nd, not too difficult, but exceedingly complex when you really get into it. That's it for those. We will be stepping up with the letters to Timothy next time. I've been Father Ryan Humphries. This has been the CU Catecast, and I hope you have a good afternoon.